Shalom Aleichem. Hilchot Talmud Torah. Rabbeinu Rambam, Zichrono Livracha. Perek Hey, Halacha Yod or Wow. We saw in the previous halacha matters to do with kavod, kibud rabo. In the previous halacha we saw over here not to call one's Rav by his name. Asur likroth lo lethamid likroth lerabo bishmo. We also saw v'lo yiten shalom lerabo or yachzir lo shalom keder shenotnim haraim, not to say hello as one does to just anybody. And now Rambam continues in this vein, and he says in halacha yod well, v'chen lo yahlos tefilo b'fnei rabo. He should not remove his tefillin before his Rav. This, of course, is based on the assumption and on the reality that tefillin were worn certainly by Talmidei Hachamim all day, or most of the day. And therefore, removing one's tefillin was a little bit like undressing in front of one's Rav, or showing up to class, to the yeshiva, dressed as if one is about to begin a tennis match or something like that. There are also those who explain that the tefillim are indicative of Yirat Shamayim and Koved Rosh. Now, if you remove them in front of your Rav, it seems as if you're implying that you do not have Yirat Shamayim or Yirat Kavod in front of one's Rav. So all of this raises the question, what about today? Let's say we're talking about a Rav, it could be a very great Chacham, who is not nohev to wear tefillin all day, because that is the standard practice, and that's the practice that he follows. But he could be a Hadmi Gedolei Ador. And someone, a Talmid, comes to him or wants to speak to him, ask him questions, or comes to a shiur of his, and he does want to wear tefillin, not like the standard practice. Is it considered chutzpah b'fnei rabo to do so or not? I think one could approach this question in two ways. One could say, yes, b'vaday, it's an indication of a lack of kavod to the Rav, because you're making out that I'm a bigger tzaddik and I'm a bigger medakdek b'miswoth than the Rav. Haraya, I'm wearing tefillin and he's not wearing tefillin, and that is improper. On the other hand, one could mention here, for example, and many people would say, what's the problem? One of the major problems is what's called yuhara. Yuhara is haughtiness, putting on airs, trying to show off. And some Chachamim, some Posukim would answer in that vein. Others, perhaps, possibly the Gra, in whose name it is reported in Ma'aseh Rav, that he encouraged people to wear tefillin all day, or as much as they could. And he also says there in his name explicitly, Lo yahshosh li yohara, not to be concerned that people will say this, that you are acting in a haughty manner because other people don't do it, and who are you, etc., etc. We'll discuss this matter further, perhaps when we study the Hilchot tefillin. For now, we'll continue. So it's difficult to be definitive, I think. Excuse me. It's difficult, I think, to be definitive on this question, whether it's considered chutzpah or not, because on the one hand, you're doing so Tefila Torah. It's not as if it says in the Shulchan Aruch or in the Tur that's asur to wear tefillin all day. It doesn't say that. It says in the Hagul Shilo, because if you want, having just told you that that's the mitzvah is to wear them all day, and if you now look around, or you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, well, wait a second, I'm not wearing tefillin, or neither is he, so what's going on here? So these sefarim, like the Tur, like the Shulchan Aruch and others, tell you, well, you should know the fact is that Am Yisrael has not been doing this by and large for a long time. And it's not as if there's any isur involved, quite the opposite. It's a tremendous mitzvah. So it's a bit difficult to be certain on the subject, I would think. And therefore, I suppose a Talmud in that situation could turn to the Rav and ask him outright if he has any problem with him wearing tefillin or not. And hopefully the answer will be no, it's not my minhag, but if that's what you wish to do, that's fine. And I have no problem with that. So Rambam continues. So we're not talking about not wearing, we're talking about removing in front of one's Rav, which is a sign of disrespect. In other words, he should not be in the presence of his Rav in a manner which indicates that he's at ease and he's spending time with a friend. He's shooting the breeze, as some might say. He should sit as if he's sitting before a king. Ela yoshev ki yoshev lifnei hamelech. Well, that's a very good indication. A person knows how he would behave if he was standing in front of the king, particularly in ancient times when usually frequently kings had tremendous, almost unlimited power. So people did not allow themselves to be relaxed and at their ease. So hasibah is a form of sitting, or actually not sitting, but reclining, which was customary during meal times, at least for wealthier people. And that is something one should not do in front of one's Rav. And for this reason, it states in Masechet Pesachim regarding Leila Seder and the concept of Hasibah over there, it says that the Talmid Bifnei Rabo is not hayav to do Hasibah and Leila Seder if he's at his Rav's home for the Seder, or they're doing the Seder together in whatever circumstance it might be. He should not pray in front of his Rav, in other words, with his Rav behind him, and not behind him, so that the Rav is in front of him, and not alongside him, because all of these situations imply that you're comparing yourself to the Rav. The Talmid is not sufficiently in awe of the Rav, because if one, for example, if one stands b'tfilah alongside the Rav, this implies that maybe it could be understood this way, even if that wasn't your intention, that you consider yourself to be more or less equal, or not that different, etc. Keep in mind again what we said last time, that in the past, in ancient times, one literally knew Torah because it had been taught to you by your Rav, sometimes by a number of Rabbanim. And without their teaching you, without them having taken the time and transmitted to you the Torah. We're talking here about the Torah Ba'al Peh, of course. Torah B'Ichtov is written and doesn't need to be transmitted. Well, even that's not true, by the way. What I just said is not really precise, because you needed to know how to read the words, what the nikud, what the vocalization and the ta'amim were, and this is something you also learned from the Rav, although that was something that hopefully you really learned as a child. That was the idea, at least. That this you would know before you were well before Bar Mitzvah. So, even with regards to Torah B'Ichtav, often your knowledge of the Torah B'Ichtav was reliant on your having learnt it from your Rav. But with regards to Torah Ba'al Peh, no question that it was something that you learned directly from the Rav, that was not written down. There was no book to turn to. And therefore, one should naturally have felt this this tremendous respect and awe from this Rav, who conveyed this information to you in the first place. Today, with all the books before us, the situation is different. Not quite the same as before, but also not completely different. And the more one learns, I think, the more one understands that it's not enough to be aware of a text. The question is also how to understand the text and how to even to know which books to look up, precisely because there are so many books today from all periods of history, and there are new books coming out all the time, etc., etc. One has to receive a derech, shita, a methodology of Libut Torah, and that I think is more or less on a par with having learned with learning the essential information, just the Mishneh itself, shall we say, in ancient times. Rambam continues. We said, "Lo yitpalel lifnei Rabbo, v'lo la'achar Rabbo, v'lo b'sad Rabbo, v'en tzarich lomar she'asur lo lahalech b'tzido." And when walking together, let's say they're walking together in the street, he should not walk beside the Rav. In other words, he should be walking along, but a step behind him or something like that. These are all ways of showing respect. Ela yitrahek la'achar Rabbo u'lo yeh mechuan keneged achoro. He should therefore hang back a little bit. Yitrahek la'achar Rabbo u'lo yeh mechuan keneged achoro, but not directly behind him. Wa'achar kach yitpalel. And then, if we're talking about tefillah, then in that situation it's mutar to daven, not directly behind, and a little bit behind, but not directly behind him, to the side. In that position is mutar to daven. Ulo yikanes im rabbo lamirhas. Excuse me. Ulo yikanes im rabbo lamirhas. One should not enter the public bathhouse where people are naked with one's Rav. Rambam mentions in Hilchot Yisurat Biyan Sefer Kedusha, Perek Kaf Aleph, Halakha Tet Zayin. I will share this with you now. Here Rambam writes, V'chen aseru hachamim, you see here, V'chen aseru hachamim al ha'ish sheyadur b'vet hamiu. live once he gets married in his father-in-law's home. Shazo azuth panimhi. This is something we won't discuss at length now, but we also know that this was precisely the opposite was the case. Very often in Europe, for hundreds of years, in the more recent past, that was in fact the custom. Nor should he enter because of the respect he owes his father-in-law. He should not enter the bathhouse with him. Nor should one enter the bathhouse with one's father, nor with his brother-in-law, the husband of his sister, nor with his talmid. But if he needs the talmid's assistance, shall we say he's old and somewhat frail, and he needs someone to hold on to support him and to help him, mutar leikanes im, what is mutar to do so. In this, the context here in Hilchot Yisroel B'Yah Perek Kaf Aleph is all manner of behaviors that can lead to improper behavior in the sexual realm. But here, with regards to the Rav, it's not the hashash. The hashash is a lack of kavod, a lack of respect, because he should not be with his Rav when he is naked. Okay, so we can return to Hilchot Talmud Torah. Halacha Yud Aleph. Rambam says, Lo yeshev b'mkom rabo. As we have discussed before, as one is not allowed to do with one's father, one is not allowed to sit in that place where the Rav usually sits. V'lo yachri'a devaro b'fano, nor should he a question that's being discussed, shall we say, he should not say, well, I'll set you all straight and explain to you how you should think about this. Lo yachri'a devaro b'fano. Here, we're not talking about a situation where it is clear that the Rav is mistaken about something. Here, we're talking about a situation where the matter is milatha de talia bisvara, something which is a matter of sevara, and it's particularly in this realm of sevara, of how one might address a matter or think about it, or conceptualize it. It's precisely here that a talmid is more likely to be to act in a manner which is hasuf, which is lacking in respect and humility vis-a-vis the Rav, because a talmid might understand, well, this Rav knows a great deal more than I do, but when it comes to coming up with some svara, with some idea, some conceptualization or rationale in a halachic context, I also can think, and I can also express an opinion. So if it's something that is clearly mistaken, and the Rav was mistaken or misled, and is maybe misleading others, we'll see in a moment about that. But when it comes to something which is not clear, and this the Rambam explains in a Teshuvah, something which is shakul, something where it's possible to look at it in one way, and it's also possible to look at it in another way. There, the Talmid should not place his own savara before that of the Rav. On the other hand, if a Talmid sees or hears that the Rav explains or states something, and he has clear ra'ayoth that it is not so, or the Rav made a mistake or was confused, then the Talmud is allowed to say something, and even then he has to express it in a certain way. Rambam continues. He may not contradict what the Rav said. When he comes to learn with the Rav, he should remain standing until the Rav tells him to sit down. If you want an example of this, even in the present day, you can think of a courthouse, for example. The judge enters, everyone is supposed to stand, and you're not supposed to sit until the judge says to sit, etc.
If one is already sitting and the rabbi walks into the room, but they're far enough away from them that they're not within form, they don't need to get up for that, right?
Well, we'll see these specific halachot in a short while, in the next perek. All right, so we know that it is mutar to disagree on halachic matters, and we know that the study of Torah is first and foremost the search for truth. In other words, kavod rabo does not come at the expense of the truth of the matter of the halacha or the understanding of the concept in the Torah at hand. So one of the things that a Talmud may not do is disagree with the Rav halacha ma'aseh in his presence, in the Rav's presence, in front of others. This was obviously a lack of kavod. But shelo b'fano, not in his presence, he is allowed to do so. And Rambam himself expresses such an opinion in a few places. It does actually acts in this fashion in a few places. One example, see the Hilchot Shehita, which I will show you now. Here in Halacha Yod or Halacha Heth, in Hilchot Shehita, Rambam mentions something which is a mahloket amongst the Chachamim with regards to a siracha. A siracha is a lesion on the lung usually. Rambam says here, Yesh makomoth shemin hagam. Rambam says it's a minhag. If it was something which had to do with something mefurash in the Talmud, he would not address the matter in such a way. He's talking about something where there are different minhagim or different halachic approaches, but it's not clear from the Talmud what the halacha should be. So Rambam says, Yesh mekomot shemin hagam im masa'ul siracha min ha'ozen lebasar ula'isem shabasar la'oth. If in certain places in the animal a siracha is found, wa siracha devuka b'shtehen, and is well connected and attached to that spot in the animal's anatomy, or serim otha, the animal is to be considered tarif. Waba Mari Zecher Tzadik Livracha, and my father, says Rambam, min ha'oserim was amongst those who thought that this should be the case, that it should be asur. وَأَنِي مِنْ هَمَتِرِينَ, and I follow the opinion of those who think that it is mutar. So here we have an example where Rambam is disagreeing with his own father, who was also his Rav, his teacher. So it is mutar to do so, but you can see, you hear the lashon which Rambam uses to express this different opinion. It is also the case that in Hilchot, in other places, Rambam mentions the halachic opinions of his teachers, and often he follows them, but occasionally he does not follow them. One such example is in Hilchot Shavuot in Sefer Hafla'ah, Perek Yud Aleph. So here we are in Hilchot Shavuot, which I will now share with you. In Sefer Hafla'ah, Hilchot Shavuot, Perek Yud Aleph, Halacha Tetwa or Yod Daled. Rambam here says, Hadayanim shehishbi'u et hanishba' b'chol lashon shehu makira, harei zo k'miswatha. In other words, if a person who is involved in some litigation before the Beth Din, some monetary matter, and according to the halakha, this person who's making a certain claim, the other person caused him damage or owes him money, etc., is required to swear that it is as he claims. He may do so in any language, says Rambam. In any language that he understands, that is correct and proper. And so it was also stated by the Geonim, or at least some of the Geonim. Aval, Rambam continues, Rabothai horu, but my teachers closer to my time and myself, Rambam says, she'en mashmi'im ela b'lashon HaKodesh. This is often, when it uses this language, it is often a reference to Rabbeinu Yosef ibn Migash, who was the Rav of Rambam's father, who was a Talmud of the Rif. At any rate, Rabothai horu she'en mashmi'im ela b'lashon HaKodesh, that it must be done in Hebrew only. And Rambam says explicitly, وَأَنْ رَأُوِي لِسْمُخْ عَلْ هُرَيَا زَوْ, and this opinion should be ignored. It is not a correct opinion, and one should not act in this way or take it into account. And Rambam adds, وَأَفْعَلْ پِيشُنَهُ كَلْ بَتَيْ دِنِيمْ لَهَشْبِعَ بُلَشَنَ HaKodesh. And even though it is true, and Rambam writes here, Rambam was saying that it is mutar to instruct a person, a litigant, in a Beth Din, to swear in any language that he understands, even though some of his own teachers, or a generation before his time, people from whom he learnt, were of the opinion that it should only be b'lashon HaKodesh. And Rambam here states, وَأَفْعَلْ پِيشُنَهُ كَلْ بَتَيْ دِنِيمْ لَهَشْبِعَ بِلَشَنَ HaKodesh. Even though it is true that the accepted custom in all Batei Din is to do so only b'lashon HaKodesh, צריך להודיע את הנשבע עד שיהיה מכיר לשון השבועה. So even if you are following that practice, if the Beit Din is following this practice of the Shavuah being administered in Lashon HaKodesh, the person making the Shavuah has to be able to understand what it is that he is saying, what he is swearing. So it has to be explained to him if he doesn't understand Lashon HaKodesh. Sheshavuat HaDayanim hi Shavuat HaPikadon Ba'asma. This is a Shavuah which is discussed in the Torah, Shavuat HaPikadon, and the person has to understand what he is saying. It cannot be an empty statement, simply enunciated pro forma. Rambam adds, "Wa'af Shavuat Hesed," which is not min HaTorah, Na'ahu Kol Ha'am LaHashbi'a Otha B'Lashon HaKodesh. That is the minhag. Rambam doesn't have a problem with the minhag, but he does find it necessary to tell us this particular opinion, which claims that it cannot be done ela b'lashon hakodesh, only in lashon hakodesh. This is how it must be. This is incorrect, says Rambam. And Rambam probably felt that sometimes this leads to a situation where the person is told to make a shivu'ah when he doesn't really understand what he's swearing to. And there is a problem with that. At any rate, we see that Rambam was willing to and found it necessary and thought it was correct to express his opinion, even to disagree with his father. But he wasn't doing so b'fano, in front of him, in front of others, which would be clearly disrespectful. But he considered the truth of the Torah to be paramount.
Rav,
Yes.
in different places throughout the Mishneh Torah, when the Rambam references the psakim of his teachers, he sometimes uses different language to introduce it. So in the halakha that we just read, it said, "En ra'ui lismoch al ha'razah." In other places, he just gives his opinion and he says, "Or bathai perashu kach v'chach." I think in another place he says, "Rabothai perashu dvarim shen ra'ui l'shamam," or something like that. Even stronger language. So, is there anything that can be learned with the different ways that he introduces the things that he was taught by his teachers?
Yes, most definitely. In this case, in the Hilchot Shivot that we just saw, Rambam is very categorical, and he's telling you, I think, to make this claim, which is not based on anything in the Talmud, to make it a matter of principle, to say it can only be done in this way, is first of all without basis, and second of all can and almost certainly will lead in some cases to a very problematic situation where the shuvah is not understood, and therefore he finds it necessary to say, in an unambiguous way, that this hora'ah is incorrect in my view, and there's no reason to stick to this minhag. If Beit Din thinks it's better that the shuvah be said but b'chol lashon, then why not do so if that's what the halakha allows for? In other situations, Rambam will say sometimes that Rabothai, or one should do such and such. For example, Kiddush on the first night of Sukkot. So Rambam mentions the minhag of his Rabothai, of his teachers, to say Kiddush standing, even though the rest of the year they would say Kiddush sitting, from which we understand that the whole year they said Kiddush sitting, but because at the end of Kiddush one recites the Beracha Leshev Basukah, they would say the Kiddush standing on Leil Sukkot, and then at the end they would say the Beracha Leshev Basukah and then sit down. And the Rosh, as we all know, disagrees with this, stating that Leshev Basukah has nothing to do with sitting. Leshev has to do with dwelling. Leshevet also means to dwell, not just to sit. And there's no reason to stand in a demonstrative fashion, and then, having said Leshev Basukah, to then sit down in a demonstrative fashion. There's no rationale behind this at all. But Rambam accepts apparently this practice. He doesn't say have to do it, but he seems to go along with it. Other times, Rambam may recognize that a certain hora'ah or svara that his teachers, or some of his teachers, held, in his mind made a fair amount of sense, and he generally leaned towards that opinion. But he also recognized that you could argue the case differently, and that's why sometimes he says, "Ra'ui lishma." It's correct to follow this opinion, but he's not saying it has to be that way. So it all depends on the matter at hand. So we now continue in Hilchot and Torah, Perek Hey. All right, so we're looking at Halacha Yod Aleph. So we spoke about sitting in the Rav's place, or contradicting him, or suggesting that I have a svara which should override the Rav's svara, even though it's actually not obvious that it should be so. And that has to do with when one is in front of the Rav, when one wishes to leave. For instance, one has been learning with the Rav for example, for 2 hours, and now he needs to leave. Rambam says, "V'lo ya'amod." Yeah, "V'lo ya'amod milafano." We should not get up to leave his Rav's presence. Ad sheyomad lo amod. So he should. So what should he do? He needs to indicate somehow to the Rav that he has to leave, and the Rav will give him permission to do so. V'lo ya'amod milafano ad sheyomad lo amod. Or ad sheyitol reshut la'amod. He somehow has to receive the Rav's permission. In other words, it's not. It's if you want if you want an example of the opposite, think of a modern day university where it's free for all, and the students and the lecturers, the professors, they're all on the same level. Everyone's equal. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone can act and behave and do as they please. That is not a healthy situation, not even in a Gentile world, not even in the academic world, for reasons that I think any reasonable person will immediately appreciate. But Kal Wahomer, it cannot be so in the Torah world. In this connection, I might mention, if I can call it up here briefly, just a moment, something else. To show you what an example of what we just saw in the Rambam now in the Talmud Bavli, Masechet Shabbat, Daf Yod Amud Aleph. Let me share this with you. I hope you can see the daf of the Gemara here. And I'll try and mark out the place. We're talking here about the relative weight and importance and emphasis on tefillah as opposed to limud Torah. How should these things be balanced? So we see, for example, it says here, I'll bring it up to closer to the top of the page, perhaps. Here you should be able to see on the top line, I hope. Rabbah Haziel Rav Hamanuna the Kamarich Bistalote. Rabbah saw that Rav Hamanuna, his tefillah, his davening was a very long affair. And Rabbah thought that this was the wrong balance in terms of time. The Torah comes first. And therefore he said, Amar manihim haya ulam wa sakim bahaya sha'a. Is that how things should work? And Rashi explains over here opposite the first or second line of the Talmud, Rashi says, Hayya Olam, Torah. Hayya Olam is Torah. Whereas Tefila, Sorech Hayya Sha'ah, hi, lirufu'ah, lishalom, ulimzonoth. In the first place, Tefila is turning to Hashem and requesting assistance and sustenance, health, and other forms of success and well-being in this world, which is Hayya Sha'ah. And if tefillah is looked on in that way and understood and experienced in that way, then clearly Hayya Olam, which is the Torah, is a more profound and more a more important way to spend one's time than asking for things for oneself, for one's family, or even for others. It could be added, and it should be added, that if tefillah is experienced by a person, as it is by a certain type of tzaddik nisgav, by a certain kind of very spiritual and very high octane tzaddik, shall we say, who has a very, very powerful, overpowering connection to Hashem through tefillah, then tefillah is not just about Hayya Sha'ah, then it's actually something else, and it's an Avodat Hashem on the level of Hayya Olam also. But that's another discussion. What we see here is that Rabbah thought, with regards to Rav Hamanunah, that he was overdoing it. So he expressed this opinion. Then it goes on to say here, if you go down to where perhaps you can see that I'm pointing to, and the Gemara also asks, what is the relevant? What is the relative weight to be given to these different activities? Who savar Rav Hamanunah, who davened for such a long time, who savar zaman tefillah lahod, uzman Torah lahod, and that could be based on what I just said a moment ago, that Rav Hamanunah, his tefillah was not just about Hayya Sha'ah, it was something quite different. And this is a deep and profound topic in itself. We won't go into it right now, but we see that it's possible to approach the concept of tefillah in more than one way. Then it goes on to say here, Rabbi Yirmiyah. Sorry, it's not what I wanted to do. Rabbi Yirmiyah, it says here, Rabbi Yirmiyah was studying and learning in front of Rabbi Zera, and they were involved in a halachic discussion. Shma'ata is a shmu'ah, Torah she'ba'al peh. Naga l'saloye wahaka mesarhev. Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rashi explains over here on the fourth line in Rashi here, Naga iher, in other words, it was becoming late, and it was soon time to daven, and Rabbi Yirmiyah wanted to get up and leave. Mesarhev, Rashi says, v'maher la'amod. And Rabbi Zera didn't like this at all. Rabbi Zera quoted by way of rebuke, he said to him, the pasuk states in Mishneh, Mesil ozno mishanu'a Torah gam tefilotho to'iva. He who turns away from the Torah, his tefillah also is undesirable and will not be accepted. Again, we see different approaches to the concept of tefillah and Torah, and how to balance these two forms of Avodat Hashem. With reference to our discussion, we see that one cannot just get up and leave whenever one chooses. And that's what Rambam here is saying. We return now to Rambam in Hilchot Talmud Torah. So you see, you have to receive permission to leave. And when he does leave, when he's leaving his presence, lo yahazir ahorah, he should not turn around and walk away and turn his back to him. Ela nirta' la'ahorah, he should walk backwards, like one does at the end of tefillah. Ufano keneged pano. These are examples of what these are further expressions of what Chazal say in the Mishneh, Masechet Avot, and the Rambam quoted earlier. Mura rabach k'mura shamayim. One's fear of one's Rav, one's awe and respect for him should be similar to that which one has klapesh shemaya, towards heaven. We shall stop here for today.
Rabbi, if you have a minute.
Yes.
In the last halakha that we learned last week about calling his rabbi by their name, to what extent does that apply if, like today, people's rabbis' names are part of their title? So it wouldn't be necessarily a disrespectful thing to say rabbi such and such.
The first thing to point out is that there's a difference between most people and a Talmid Muvhak of the Rav. In other words, most people, they consider him to be a tremendous Rav, and maybe they follow his psakim and they go to his shiurim, but they're not necessarily a Rav, a Talmid Muvhak. There may be many people like that, and they can refer to him as Harav so and so, and people know to whom he's referring, and that is okay. But we're talking about a Rav Muvhak, a Talmid Muvhak of a Rav. And there, it is expected of the Talmud not to say Harav Yosef kach v'kach amar, but rather to say Mori Rabbi Amar, or something along those lines. And this is what we see in the Rishonim. We find we saw in Hilchot Shehita earlier in the Rambam referred to his father as Abi Mari. He refers to his father by that title in a number of places. In the Rishonim, we often see that the person writing says, Amar li Mori kach v'kach. He doesn't mention even his name, because everyone knows who it is, but he doesn't want to mention his name. That was the normal way. So for a Talmid Muvhak of the Rav, it is proper to act in that way. For other people, even though the Rav is very great and they hold him in very high regard, it is okay to indicate his name. Tov, hayu beruchim, שיהיה לכולנו בתוך כלל ישראל שנה טובה, כתיבה טובה, היו ברוכים, יזכו ויאמץ לבבכם כל המייחלים לאדוני.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.